Has Oscar Piastri's move from Alpine to McLaren set a dangerous precedent for Formula One? Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff says it has, warning it shows a young, promising driver can manoeuvre themselves out of an organisation that has funded their career by being, as he put it, clever. At a time when it's more expensive than ever for a young driver to make their way through the junior ranks and even have the chance to prove themselves ready for Formula One, it is a legitimate concern. After all, teams don't want to spend big on young drivers only for rivals to benefit from their investment, as McLaren will now do with Piastri. But has Piastri's move to McLaren really dealt an irreparable blow to young driver programs, and could it perhaps even make life more difficult for those aspiring to climb the ranks behind him? First, we should say that Wolff is well worth listening to on the topic of young driver development. He's been a driver manager both in his own right and through Mercedes. George Russell, Valtteri Bottas and Esteban Ocon all owe their places in F1 in part to Wolff. What's more, Wolff knows the value of young drivers. Russell was placed at Williams for 3 years to prepare him for his drive with the Works Mercedes team. And when world champion Nico Rosberg announced his shock retirement at the end of 2016, Mercedes shelled out around $10 million to extract Valtteri Bottas from Williams, which had first signed the Finn back in 2010. Mercedes currently has a roster of 7 in its junior programme, which indicates its ongoing support of young drivers. Formula 2 race winner Frederik Vesti is currently its highest ranked junior, although it has members all the way down to the karting ranks. When Wolff was asked about the effect of Piastri's move, he admitted that he didn't have insight into the details of the saga. But he did express his concerns that F1 teams will have to be more careful in its dealings with young drivers in the future. The implication is that this could also lead to F1 teams being wary of investing in the drivers and the supporting infrastructure. While Wolff said Mercedes will remain dedicated to finding and developing young talent, he did suggest the Piastri case indicates the need for even stricter contracts. So is Wolff right? Has a dangerous precedent really been set by Piastri that could force teams not only to tighten up their contracts, but perhaps even consider whether such junior programs are worth it at all? This brings us to the circumstances of Piastri's exit. If you listen to everything that Alpine team principal Otmar Szafnauer has said about his departure, Wolff is absolutely right to say Piastri and his management have used clever manoeuvrings to get out of the deal. Szafnauer has directly questioned Piastri's integrity and repeatedly stated that it had a firm contract with Piastri covering 2023 and 2024. However, the Contract Recognition Board ruled unanimously that this was not the case, ordered Alpine to pay costs, and pointed at the finger at the team for, to use the most devastating of phrases, shilly-shallying about giving Piastri a real contract for 8 months. While not everyone in the F1 paddock believes Piastri and his manager Mark Webber have done the right thing in forsaking Alpine, which has supported Piastri since 2020 and put him on an extensive testing programme this year with a view to him being an Alpine F1 driver in the long term, but few have any sympathy following the Contract Recognition Board's damning verdict. This made it clear that Piastri had not signed a contract, and it concluded that while Alpine held up its end of the deal in terms of what it offered Piastri for 2022, in terms of test mileage and simulator work, there's no evidence to suggest it went above and beyond, as has often been stated in preparing Piastri for F1. The CRB verdict showed Alpine badly dragged its heels in the background. A term sheet was signed by Piastri on November 15, 2021 to set out the basis for his deal as reserve driver ahead of a longer-term F1 driver contract being agreed. Szafnauer cited this as proof of Alpine's loyalty to Piastri, loyalty that he believes should have been reciprocated. And yet even the reserve driver deal still had not translated into something concrete by March 2022. Alpine treated the term sheet as a valid binding contract, even though it was not. It added the words legally binding heads of terms to the top of the document Piastri had signed 4 months previously and submitted that to the CRB to get him a 2022 super licence as its reserve driver. This makeshift agreement did not go beyond the current season, and Alpine fumbled the rest of the process so badly that it took months for Piastri to receive a full contract proposal for 2023 to 2026, despite pressure from his management to get on with it. This arrived in May, mapped out a possible 2-year loan spell at Williams, and did not guarantee Piastri an Alpine drive until 2025 at the earliest. The race understands that this was looked on witheringly by the CRB, hence the accusation of shilly-shallying. It's not clear how much of the delay was down to incompetence and how much was deliberate, given the ongoing uncertainty over Alonso's future. Alpine has confirmed it offered Alonso a 1+1 contract, so one covering 2023 with an option for 2024, and intended to bring Piastri in eventually, but it wasn't certain when. Piastri said this led to him losing trust in Alpine and contributed to his decision to move to McLaren, a team that clearly showed it did want him and that was actually capable of drafting a binding contract for him to sign. Therefore, not only was Piastri not under contract, but Alpine had actually dragged its heels for 8 months when it should have produced one in the wake of the November term sheet. While Wolff, who it should be noted has connections to Alpine through his management of Ocon, calls that clever manoeuvring, it instead seems Alpine losing Piastri was the inevitable consequence of a driver being messed around by a team that failed to ensure he had a contract signed and sealed. As for stricter contracts, well, in Alpine's case, the problem was actually the existence of a contract and not the use of some clever loophole to escape. Wolff is right that every team will be making sure its contracts with junior drivers are watertight, but it's hard to imagine Wolff's team being as lax as Alpine in the terms it signs its young prospect up to. It's true Alpine did invest significantly in Piastri's career, but it overplayed the extent of its investment with Safnau's public comments. After all, Piastri's original 2-year plans in each of F3 and F2 were both completed in one season, and his testing mileage to date totals 8 days. It also contributed only part of his F2 budget, while the proportion of his F3 seat it paid was through his prize for winning Formula Renault Eurocup. Yes, that has all helped Piastri's career and prepared him well for F1, but the idea that young drivers should behave as if in indentured servitude to teams is a ludicrous one. It's a question of contractual rigour. Take Red Bull as an example. Alpine is now set to shell out significant cash in order to secure Pierre Gasly's services as he's under contract to Red Bull for 2023. Red Bull knows there's a good chance of losing Gasly for 2024 anyway, so it's a pragmatic move not to stand in his way and instead cash in on its investment. Gasly revealed ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix that 2023 is actually the final year of a 10-year deal he agreed with Red Bull when he was first signed in 2014. While Gasly stated his loyalty to Red Bull and that he owed lots to them, it's also clear that the company was sharp enough to ensure it had a binding, long-term deal that won't allow him to move on without agreement. Piastri had no such thing because Alpine failed to provide a contract. It's also important to stress that teams don't invest in young drivers through pure altruism. Yes, there are good, genuine people involved who enjoy helping young drivers fulfill their potential, but the spend is signed off with a view to the investment paying off. That means either one day they prove themselves good enough to warrant a place in your F1 team, a much cheaper option than paying top dollar to recruit a driver from elsewhere, or they can be sold on to a rival. If not, they will be dropped. Loyalty be damned. And while there are countless aspiring drivers, a vanishingly small number are good enough to become a Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton. That's why there's so much competition for the really promising ones. Remember the battle Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari had over Verstappen services before he came into F1. F1 junior schemes will continue because it's in the interest of the teams. And while it is true to say that there should be some level of loyalty that must go both ways, the dangerous precedent set by Piastri's McLaren move is very different to the one Wolff has indicated. The real danger is to teams who fail to do the basics when it comes to locking down their investments. And for all the claims of lack of integrity and contractual wranglings, that's the problem at the heart of this. Piastri joined McLaren because he was not under contract, and McLaren signed him for that reason. The blame for that lies solely at the door of Alpine.